Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and in today's video I'll be talking about F1 Fantasy post Miami, looking ahead to Imola in a week's time. And to do this, I'll be updating the good and bad driver and constructors tier list for your team selections with a brief explanation as to why. I'll break down any key drivers and constructors points from Miami. Then gonna look at my team, how well I've done and the points I've gotten from Miami, including if I'll use any chips for Imola. And then finally, I'll look at my league, which now has 65 people in it. Thank you all for joining. And then, of course, make sure to like and subscribe, and let's get straight into it. So, like I did in the last video, I'm gonna start off with the top season points down to the lowest, and that means we start off with Max Verstappen. 233 points overall, 63 points in Miami, 27.4 million, so yes, he's expensive, but for the points you're getting, he's worth it. He qualified 9th in Miami, got driver of the day, and got the race win. And the reason that's so good is because he qualified 9th, he got loads of race bonuses, and he has not been lower than 2nd place this season. You have to have him in your team. Up next is Sergio Perez, who has 205 points overall. He got 28 points in Miami, so respectable. Again, hasn't finished below 2nd place this season. Looks like he will be second fiddle to Verstappen, which is a shame, but for 18.4 million, it's worth it how much he's getting you, considering he is around 60 points more than the next person I'll be talking about, which is Fernando Alonso. 9.2 million, he is cheap as chips. He's actually half the price of even Perez. 137 points, 25 points in Miami, and realistically, he's always getting 3rd place. He's not going to reach the Red Bulls anytime soon, but for 9.2 million, there's a reason you need him. On to Lewis Hamilton. Now, this is the first bad driver in my list. 23.8 million, too expensive considering only 107 points overall. 24 points in Miami, which is again not bad, but overall points just isn't good enough considering his price tag is just more than any other driver apart from Verstappen. Not a good option. On to Carlos Sainz. I will call him Mr. Consistent this season. As you can see from his points, he's getting always around 20 points this season on most races. Not a bad pick, but still 80 points from 17.2 million is just not good enough for him to be in your team, but is definitely the best differential at the minute if you don't want to just have the Red Bull and Aston boys. On to George Russell. Again, 18.6 million is just too expensive for 80 points. He did well in Miami, getting 28 points, but again, like Hamilton, overall, it's not worth looking at Russell this season so far. It might change later on, but for now, don't even look at him. On to Lance Stroll, who is having a bit of a resurgence now, which is good to see. He's cheap as chips, being 7.7 million, 12 points in Miami, which isn't very good, but he had an off weekend with qualifying, and I thought he would be able to get more bonus points for race overtakes, but he only finished 12th or 13th. 54 points overall, considering he also had minus 14 points in Saudi Arabia. He would be above George Russell in points. He probably would be above Sainz in points as well. And for 7.7 million, he's definitely a good option. On to Pierre Gasly, who is now 8.1 million. Again, I still think he's a bit too expensive for my tastes, but overall points are now starting to speak out, I think. He's got 54 points. He's been consistent. 10 from Miami. I still wouldn't take him over Stroll, but again, like Sainz and Gasly, I believe, are the best differentials to have if you don't want to be boring and just have Aston Martin and Red Bull. On to Charles Leclerc. Again, he is one of my bad drivers. Same as Hamilton, too expensive for the points you receive back, as he's 21.2 million and only an overall 46 points, which is less than a quarter of the points Verstappen has, and Verstappen is only 6 million more. 16 points in Miami is okay, but considering what I saw at Baku, I was a bit disappointed with Ferrari this weekend, so his price needs to drop significantly until I would bring Leclerc even over Sainz on my list. Then on to Magnussen, again too expensive for a Haas driver, being 6.5 million, considering his teammate Hülkenberg is much cheaper, and yes, he gets you less points, but 6.5 million, he's not a budget driver. And if he's not a budget driver, 41 points is not good enough. On to Yuki Tsunoda, who I have now put into my good list, as he is cheap as chips, again being 4.7 million, 27 points overall, which is not bad considering he's had a DNF. 16 points in Miami, again very good. He's looking like the next best driver for now on the budget, considering the next driver I'm talking about was the person I thought was best, but is slowly losing it, is Zhou Guanyu. 27 points overall. Basically, Tsunoda and Zhou are very similar into the fact you're going to get similar points with them, and now it is a guessing game on who to pick. Realistically, I'm going to stick with Zhou for one more race and see what happens, but it could be time to switch over to Tsunoda now. So I would not be surprised if this happened to a lot of people. Next up, Lando Norris. Again, too expensive in a McLaren that needs major upgrades. He's only had 26 points this season, 1 point from Miami, not good enough. Valtteri Bottas, again, like the teammate situation with Magnussen, he's 7.5 million Bottas, so he's not a budget driver, and to only have 24 points, which is less than his teammate, it doesn't make sense to bring him in. Then onto Hulkenberg, who he is at the edge of my good list, and the reason for that is just because he is so cheap, and it might come down to that this season if a car like Mercedes or Ferrari starts to get better, that you need Hulkenberg in. But the reason why he's on the cusp of good and bad, and I don't know yet, is because I don't think they're there yet. I still think Zhou or Tsunoda are the better options, and you don't need to budget yourself that much for now. So Hulkenberg, not the best option, but still better than Magnussen. Onto Piastri, same as Norris. Of course, he's a bit cheaper, but he's got you less points, 15 points. He's 6.7 million, he's gone down in price, and that just McLaren just isn't getting you enough points. Not good enough. Esteban Ocon up next. Again, too expensive at 9.2 million, 8 points in Miami, 7 points overall. So 8 points in Miami was pretty decent for him. But again, Gasly, his teammate, is a better Alpine option if you don't want to go for the generic Stroll and Alonso types. We get on to Nick de Vries. Again and again, he's just underperforming in that car, and he's crashing a lot, which is also dangerous considering how many negative points you get for DNFing. He's too much of a risk, only 3 points this season. There is no reason to bring him in, especially he's 4.7 million, so Tsunoda and Zhou are the better options for that price tag. Yes, he's a budget driver, so I would still say it'd be alright if you had him in, because that means you could fit in your Aston Martins and your Red Bulls, but still not to my liking. He's on my bad list. Logan Sargent with -1 point. Same as Hulkenberg, would not pick unless really needed for a low budget, and again, I don't think you have to go that low for now, but later on in the season, again, could be useful because he's only 3.6 million, so that could save you 1.1 million, which might be the difference between if you need a better driver. Finally, Alex Albon, -18 points, speaks for himself. 5.1 million, he's just in a terrible position, too inconsistent, getting quite a few DNF points and getting quite a few overtaken points in the races. Steer clear of Alex Albon. Then onto constructors, which is really easy to do, as Red Bull, 27.7 million, 476 points this season, more than double than the next option. Must have Red Bull in your team, even though they are expensive. Mercedes have actually hopped over Aston Martin now on points, but only by 1 point. But considering the 25.1 million, only 2.6 less than Red Bull, and they're not even getting you half the points, steer clear of Mercedes. Aston Martin, 226.7 million, must have, as they're a budget constructor and they're getting you more points than the big teams are because they are themselves a big team now. Then we get on to Ferrari, again, is a bad team to have. 22.2 million, too expensive for 212 points. Although, I still agree that if you want the differential, Ferrari is the one to go to. Then onto Alpine, 100 points, 9.9 million, too expensive, too little points. Haas team, 5.1 million, cheap. 75 points are just not good enough for a constructor, as they are the main thing you want to focus on, as constructors get you the most points in F1 Fantasy. Same as McLaren, Alfa Romeo, Alfa Tauri and Williams. I will, in my next section, be talking about a few of these teams in Miami, as a few of them had stinkers and we need to talk about it, and a few of them had good races, which I'd like to talk about as well. But that covers the updated good and bad lists. Look at my Twitter if I update it, because I do this every week, so it might be updating after you've seen this video. But yeah, let's get on to the breakdowns of some of these drivers and teams. So the first person I want to talk about from Miami is Max Verstappen, who gained a whopping 64 points this race weekend. And the reason I want to talk about this is because this is the highest points finish so far. So if you are lucky, or if you say that you big brained it and 3 times him this weekend, very well done, because I don't see anyone beating this score anytime soon. As driver of the day gives you 10 points. Now, I've spoken about how I feel about driver of the day, as I feel like it's a bit naff to have points over this, considering it's a public vote, you know what I mean? So I don't know how I feel about it getting you points on fantasy, but for now, 10 points for driver of the day, great for Max Verstappen, as he did deserve it. Obviously, race position first, 25 points. Qualifying position 9th, 2, so obviously not a lot of qualifying positions, but realistically in qualifying, you don't get that many points for qualifying first. And look at his race positions gained. 8 points and 9 points. So that's 17 points. So that's more points than he would have got for qualifying first. And then you counter in race fastest lap, 10 points as well. And it was just a clean sweep for him. Well done, Max Verstappen, and well done to anyone who 3 times him. Then I would like to talk about Alonso and Sainz next, as these drivers have just been so consistent, but that's also what I'm worried about, as I feel like they're both going to have a DNF soon, because they're both getting around 20-ish points. Obviously, Alonso more on the high end of the 20s, and Sainz at the lower end, so like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and Alonso like 28, 29, 30 averaged. And I'm happy because they are the best two probably. Like I said, Sainz would be my differential pick. So well done to them. And let's see if they can keep it up, because I feel like sooner or later, one of them is going to have a DNF. I want to talk about Lance Stroll, as he only got 12 points in Miami, which was a bit of a letdown. But it just shows how having a good car in F1 Fantasy just makes the world of a difference. My guy qualified 18th, so it was really low. But because he was in an Aston Martin, he gained even not as many overtakes as I thought he would. But still, those overtakes got him 12 points, which is more than a Gasly who qualified 5th. And you just got to think, it shouldn't work like that. But because Gasly gets swallowed up by the rest of the cars, that's how it ends up. So even on a bad day where he only finishes 12th after qualifying 18th, it's still better than anyone else for a pick. I don't know how I feel about that. Then I'd like to talk about George Russell, who is looking like a dark horse again because he's consistent. And without that DNF in Australia, it looks like he'd be close to 100 points. Again, I still think he's just too expensive to want to have him in your team. But he's looking like a differential soon. If that Mercedes comes with the upgrades that Hamilton's waiting for, I think George Russell could be a great pick to bring in over the likes of someone like Perez, because maybe Russell will be getting you more positions gained points. So we'll have to wait and see. And then finally on the drivers list, we all knew I was going to talk about this. It's Tsunoda versus Zhou Guanyu. Now, like I said, I'm going to stick with Zhou Guanyu for the next race weekend. But if he has another stinker, I will be moving over to Tsunoda, because Tsunoda seems like he's getting into the rhythm of things, and I like to see it. So we'll just have to see how that works out. But I will say, out of the budget drivers, Tsunoda and Zhou Guanyu are the people you want to bring in. There's no one else, realistically, at that price tag that you're going to get the same amount of points for. So it has to be one of those two. So I'd like to talk about Mercedes when it comes down to constructors, as they gained 57 points this race weekend in Miami. Now, I know I would still never go near them because of their 25.1 million price tag, but they've snuck up on me. Like, I didn't realise until I looked to make this video that they are now second place in the constructors' points. Now, obviously, if you had Mercedes, you'd be very far behind, because Aston Martin are only 1 point behind, and they're so much cheaper, which means you can get a Perez into your team. But it's interesting to see, because I haven't been blown away by Mercedes in the constructors, and I kind of think they just snuck up on it. But well done for getting 57 points. Could they be a differential? Who knows? Probably not. I'd also like to talk about Ferrari. As you can see from their stats, it just looks like they have one good race and then just have one bad race. And they can't seem to keep this format. And it's really frustrating, because every race weekend I'm like, oh, Ferrari could be coming back. And then they don't. So it's quite disappointing from Ferrari. Sitting 4th in season points so far on F1 Fantasy. It's not good enough, and they need to improve. I'd also like to talk about Williams. Minus 10 points so far. Oh my god, if anyone has Williams, I feel so sorry for you. Realistically, steer clear of them like they are the plague. Disgusting how low they got. 1 point in USA, and literally it's just race overtakes, free. Race positions lost, free. One driver in Q2 from Albon, 1 point. You know what I mean? Oh, it's too bad. But I think, yeah, that sums up the breakdown of the major points that happened over the Miami Grand Prix. Now, going ahead to looking at my team, as you can see, my team is doing pretty well, nearly the top 200k in the world. And the reason why I'm pretty happy with it, considering I am 46th in my league, but our league is very competitive, which I'm really happy about at the minute, is because I haven't used any chips, and I've seen quite a few people have used multiple chips so far. So to be still within the top end of F1 Fantasy after not using any chips, very happy about that. But what I'm not happy about is Zhou Guanyu. Like I said, I'm planning on removing him if he has one more bad race weekend. Then finally, I would also like to add that I will be using my no negative chip this weekend, unless I hear any news of a penalty, because Verstappen, Perez and Alonso all haven't had a DNF in my team so far. I do believe it's coming up soon, and I'm taking a gamble and guessing it's this weekend. So I will be using the no negative chip. So let's see what happens there. But for now, my team will stay the same unless I hear any news of a penalty for maybe a Mercedes or a Ferrari. Then I will make changes to fit them in, because then they'd probably get more points than a Stroll, even a Perez, if one of them qualifies 18th and gets up to like 7th, 6th. Then realistically, the final thing that I want to talk about team-wise is alternative driver lineup, because realistically the main driver lineup at the minute is Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, Stroll and Zhou Guanyu, or maybe Tsunoda. But what I want to have a look at is the differentials, like bringing in Sainz or Russell or Gasly, which are my 3 differentials I would bring in if I was thinking about that. And realistically, as you can see on the screen now, if you wanted to bring on Carlos Sainz, you'd have to take out Perez, which obviously isn't the best, but who knows? Perez hasn't had a DNF yet as well. He could have a DNF. So this is one potential for a differential. Then the other potentials are Pierre Gasly replacing Stroll, as they're on equal points, and having Hülkenberg instead of Zhou Guanyu to counteract this if you don't have the cost to cover this. As Pierre Gasly, again, I've been slating on quite a lot this season, but he could be a good differential, and that's how your team would realistically line up if you brought Pierre Gasly in. And I think the final differential I want to look at is the George Russell differential, which is again Hülkenberg replacing Zhou Guanyu and Russell replacing Perez, as Russell's been creeping up, and I think without that DNF he would be a good differential. Again, I would like to specify that Perez is still the better option. I'm just saying, if you want to have a little bit more fun or want to maybe experiment with different teams, this would be the teams I would go to. Now let's have a look at my league. Now thank you all so much for joining it. We now have 65 people in this league, which is crazy to think about. Well done to JMV Racing, who is top at the minute, but I will have to say he has used limited. Now I'm not slating you because of that, but I'm just saying it's too early on in the season to know who will be top, because the people at the top, not to be rude, I have realised have used some of their chips. Like Benji's used autopilot this weekend and JMV has used limitless. But still very well done, as I think without those points you'd still be top, considering you're even above 200 points off me, so very well done. And then we go down to the bottom of the list, and RMS Racing is no longer bottom of the list. Now I know it's because someone new has come in called Banana Boys, but well done, bro. We take that. We take those dubs. And then Banana Boys, thank you for joining. I can see you've joined late, so don't worry about the league for now. Have some fun, see what you can do. And yeah, thank you all so much for joining. I'll link my league in the description. I'll also show it on the screen now. Obviously, like and subscribe. Do all that good shit for me. Thank you very much. And hey, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.